Gonzo Education, Chapter 3, Part 2. I woke up the next day, but there was still no sight of Benny, so I stormed to the apartment manager's office and begged her to open the door. She said she'd normally open it with her extra key, but Benny hadn't put my name on the lease and changed the locks. I called Mom, but she was at work, so she called one of our sisters. Our sisters weren't very nice to us growing up, so as adults they tried to do the occasional act of kindness. I imagine they might throw us a piece of kebab if they spotted us starving in India, if no one was looking. When our sister got there, she immediately began bitching out the manager and threatened to call the Humane Society. The manager called the locksmith, and 15 minutes later the door was open. Each kitten grabbed a nipple and commenced suckling. Mom got there after work and took Polly and our kittens back to Guy's house. She brought them with her to school that she worked at until she found each a home. I hadn't been driving my truck since I moved in with Benny. I was giving it a break and hadn't even tried to start it in a few weeks. I didn't try to start it that night either. I wasn't going anywhere until Polly was back with her kittens anyways. But after I finally had that taken care of, I tried to start it and realized it wouldn't turn over. I had nowhere to go, so I took the bus to Mom's house and slept in the backyard with their smelly dog, Elmo. Early the next morning, I walked a few miles to the day labor place, but work was scarce. By lunchtime, I realized these places weren't ever going to get me anywhere, and I needed something more permanent. Benny had told me about a telemarketing gig downtown that hired anyone on the spot. Most people quit the same day, he said. Lucky ones get out after their first check. He said the worst part about the place was the greedy, football-crazy manager who'd bully old ladies till they cried. The job was selling newspaper subscriptions over the phone. I knew I'd be good at it, but the fat boss didn't agree. During my interview, he said I had no experience selling over the phone and didn't think I was cut out for it. I felt insulted and told him I sold newspaper subscriptions door to door for years, and I broke all the sales records. The boss laughed and said, "Selling subscriptions over the phone is way different than selling them door to door. And I'm sorry, but you just don't seem like the enthusiastic type." I convinced him to let me start off part-time by telling him I'd come in with a positive attitude and plenty of pep. He rolled his eyes and said he'd give me a week to see if I could keep up with the other schmucks. I was going to do this telemarketing thing my way with a laid-back style that's foreign to the telemarketing world. It doesn't work for everyone, or anyone for that matter, so I get why he wanted me to be more upbeat. But I'm an enigma you can't put in a corner or slap a label on. The boss and his cronies didn't like me when I first walked in, but by the end of the first week, I'd become the top seller, made the most money, and was their new favorite employee. The hardest part about being homeless at a new job is waiting for your first paycheck. This particular battle wasn't that bad because the weather was mild and I was crashing in a broken down Lincoln parked in Mom's driveway. The car had been busted there for years. It was the same one she used to take us to Dairy Queen for blizzards in on Wednesday afternoons. I had fond memories in it, but I never thought I'd be sleeping in it. I knew the doors didn't lock. Michael and I broke them when we were 10. I'd get off work at night and have a long bus ride across town to Mom's driveway. It was better than her backyard. It was better than her backyard, and by the time I got there, the neighborhood was dead. Mom lived in a blue-collar area, and blue-collar workers have to get up earlier than their white counterparts. I'd spend my nights hanging on the back seat of the Lincoln, listening to music, playing guitar, smoking pot, and talking to myself without notice. When morning came and everyone started going to their jobs, I'd be careful and crouch down so no one could see me. Mom and Guy would leave early along with the rest of the neighborhood, and I'd break inside and kick back on their piece of shit couch for a couple hours before going to my soul-sucking sales job. I was wasting my time in academic ambitions. There's only so much you can learn in a telemarketing office. I had a thirst for knowledge, but my days were consumed with calling strangers and pretending I lived down the street just so I could sell them an insignificant newspaper subscription for a paper I've never read about in a city I've never been to. The first week I slept in the Lincoln was spring break. I couldn't believe where I had ended up and told myself I should be in college. I'd lay in the back seat and put myself to sleep by imagining myself as a UT student. I'd get stoned and picture myself on campus, taking tests, doing homework, and studying in the library. As soon as I got my first paycheck and first day off, I headed toward my busted truck. When I got to the bus stop, I saw a familiar face. It was an old crackhead I knew from Tona's house named Brewster. He was about 35, which was old to me at the time. Brewster had druggy written all over him with his premature wrinkles and gray hair. It was the first time I ever saw him without his trademark beat up Chevy truck. Both of us had old Chevys, and that was about the only thing we had in common. I remember always seeing him in Tona's driveway working on his truck, tinkering with this or that. The guy may have been an addict, but he did know how to work on old trucks. I couldn't have run into a better person to help. We chatted it up at the bus stop, and Brewster was cool, but when we got on the city bus, he started sweating and looking around like he didn't want to be recognized. He said he felt embarrassed about using public transportation, but I was thinking he should have been more ashamed of his missing teeth and obvious crack habit. Brewster said he was on his way to visit a friend about loaning him some money for dope. It was obvious he needed a fix. I told him I was on my way to Benny's old apartment for my truck, and if he helped me fix it, then I'd buy him some drugs. A fix for a fix, I lamely said. Brewster was Tona's boyfriend. She was married to Harry, but Brewster was her main squeeze. Despite none of them getting along with one another, they'd smoke crack and shoot up in the back room almost every night. Brewster and Harry hated each other, but they actually had a lot in common. They were both in a sexual relationship with the same woman, they both smoked crack, and they were both perverts. Cocaine turns you into a sexual deviant, making you do things you normally wouldn't even consider. There were always rumors about anal sex threesomes between Harry, Brewster, and Tona. Plenty of crackheads went to their house, but Brewster basically lived there. A couple of years had passed since I last saw Brewster, and both of us had long since stopped talking to Tona. I didn't think I'd ever see this weirdo again, but fate had us sitting on a city bus together. I told him about my homeless situation and how Benny kicked me out, and I could tell he didn't care, but at least he pretended like he was interested. Brewster didn't miss his truck for transportation. He missed it because of what he used it for, driving behind businesses to steal their wooden pallets and plastic storage containers. This is what supported his habits. He'd wait till nobody was looking, then fill the back of his truck until it was overflowing with pallets. He sold the loot to various warehouses on the outskirts of town. They'd give him about $100 per truckload before cleaning up the pallets and selling them back to the exact same stores he stole them from. I didn't want to associate with this guy, but I knew it was in my best interest until I got my truck running. The downside was that there was a good chance he'd eventually get cracked out of his mind and resort to violence. Most druggies do. If I was going to spend any time around this freak, then I needed a set escape route and be ready to jump the second things got weird. Brewster's scam of robbing businesses for their pallets had been paying for his booze and crack for years, but now that he didn't have a truck, he lost his livelihood. The fiend craved for his old life back, debating if he should start sucking dick for crack. My Chevy was almost identical to the one that he previously had, so he thought if he helped me fix it, he wouldn't have to resort to giving sweaty truck drivers blowjobs. Of course, this wasn't the case. I greatly appreciate any help he gave me, but I knew the most important thing was to keep my telemarketing job, find somewhere else to live, and never talk to this junkie again. We got off the bus about a block from Benny's apartment and walked to my truck. It took Brewster less than 5 minutes to take off the improperly installed fuel filter, blow into it to get it unclogged, and then put it back in correctly. The truck started up right away, and I drove us to his apartment where we drank a few beers while he explained the ins and outs of pallet stealing. I'd been to Brewster's apartment a few years earlier with Tona and a girl I was dating at the time. Tona and him smoked crack in the bedroom while me and my girlfriend smoked pot and cigarettes in the living room. His place was a casino and was decorated like a jail cell, but it had a big couch and an old school black and white TV that I liked. After it got dark, I drove Brewster around the east side while he stole pallets and plastic storage containers. We usually hit chain drugstores and supermarkets. We'd fill up the back of my truck and in a few minutes be stocked up with $100 of overlooked valuables. I did this with Brewster for about a week, selling pallets to shady factors on the outskirts of town. Brewster would have me wait in the truck while he went and got our money. He hardly ever gave me a cut or even told me how much we made. He'd always say he'd see how much was left after we bought drugs, but there was never any left. It didn't take long to realize that I needed to ditch him the first chance I got. I may have been homeless, but I wasn't a crackhead's bitch. I never bought drugs in the street like Brewster did. I I'd usually go through someone I knew or a friend of a friend, but Brewster would just drive around the east side until he saw a black guy standing on a corner. When I took him to buy drugs, the dealers would usually come to the driver's side window, and Brewster would have to signal him to the passenger side. I never let Brewster drive no matter how many times he asked. I was young, but I knew what kind of person I was dealing with. After we scored the crack, we'd go back to his apartment and get high and he'd get high while I kept him company by smoking weed and telling stories. By the third night, I started to wonder how this guy kept a roof over his head, so when the time was right, I asked him straight up, and he told me his stepdad owned the entire complex and let him stay for free. He didn't pay rent and had been living like that for 15 years. I wouldn't have guessed Brewster still lived off his parents. One night, he was tearing up his apartment, searching for a piece of steel wool. I was half-assed helping him when I came across an old Polaroid picture on the bottom of a shoebox. The pic was from the 1970s with a handsome blonde kid gleaming in front of a new Firebird. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing to the picture. "It's me," he defensively said. "Wow, that's you?" I asked surprisingly. "Yes, that is me." The tone he used suggested that he took offense. "It was 20 years ago," he added. "You look way different," I told him. "How'd you afford the car?" Brewster's facial expression turned along with the mood in the room. He didn't answer my question. He sadly looked at his broken down reflection in the picture frame. He was only a shell of the man he used to be. The photograph said a million words. It showed me how drugs can change who a person is and how they physically appear. He threw the photo down and said if I wanted to stay there, then I had to smoke crack. I tried to reason with him, insisting it wasn't my thing. I told him I'd grind it up and snort it instead. It took some convincing, but he eventually agreed to let me snort tiny piles of crack. I refused to willingly smoke crack, at least not at this point in my life. Brewster had nothing on me. My truck was fixed and I didn't need him. He needed me, and more importantly, he needed my truck. Dude would have done anything to keep me there, but there was no way. After a few nights of snorting crack piles, I finally had enough and planned an escape. I was going to wait for the freak to get high while I stayed sober and slipped out the back door. At dusk, we drove to the east side to get the daily crack ration, but when we got back, I told Brewster I didn't feel like taking part in that night's festivities. The junkie flipped out and started marching around his apartment with his fists clenched. I was ready to fight if that's what it came to, but instead he stormed out and said he was gonna go grab a whore. It was the first time Brewster let me alone in his place. He didn't trust me because when a thief looks in the mirror, they see a thief, and they automatically assume everyone else they see is a thief too. Less than a minute after he left, I realized I had no business staying there. I didn't have anywhere else to go, but it'd be stupid to surround myself with someone like him any longer than I had to. Brewster got back an hour later with a gray-haired hooker. She was about 50 and looked like somebody's grandmother. I felt sorry for her. She was sadder than a used package of ramen noodles stuck in a storm drain. They smoked crack in the bathroom before Brewster brought her back in the living room and sat her next to me on the couch. Then he tried to belittle me in front of her, standing over us and proclaiming, "Look, he's scared to smoke and grinds it up, like a baby." "No, I'm not scared," I told the woman. "I've done coke before, but I have to be at work very early tomorrow." She looked at me with confused eyes. Then she looked at the floor in shame and kicked her shoes together like a toddler. "I had a job once, a long time ago," she pathetically said. Brewster tried to lighten the mood by putting on some shitty 1980s hairband that nobody had ever heard of. He showed the prostitute the picture of him and his Firebird. She acted impressed. Then they went into the bedroom, and I stretched out on the couch and pretended like I was falling asleep. I kept my eyes closed until I heard the sound of bumping uglies. That was my cue. I crept out the front door and slipped to my truck. But when Brewster heard the familiar truck engine start, he ran outside, naked, and tried to chase me down. I peeled out of his crummy apartment complex while he desperately tried to grab the truck bumper. I turned up the AM radio and laughed. The last sight I ever had of Brewster was through my rearview mirror, running as fast as he could, naked, crying, and high on crack cocaine. That was from my book Gonzo Education, Chapter 3, Working Homeless, Part 2. If you like that, you can get this on Amazon. There's a lot of updated information I'm not including on here. And also click the thumbs up, the subscribe button. And like I said, you can order this on Amazon. I think it's free right now, Gonzo Education. And you can also find it under Homeless College Student as well. Thanks for watching. Check out my other channels. And my original channel is youtube.com/Gregory Brandt. That's my most successful channel. It has over 1 million views. And I hope you have a nice day. Peace.